Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of the Artsy Raven. Today we have our friend Natasha D. And Natasha is a friend of most things caffeinated, a lover of books, and a writing warrior to her core. As a believer that the pen is mightier than the sword, she graduated from Juniata College in 2015 with hopes of becoming a journalist. Instead, life took her on a different path, and Natasha found herself digging up a manuscript from her childhood. This dusty stack of papers would become the first book in her Pariah Child series, a series that was her launch into self-publishing. Since completing her first series, Natasha has continued exploring the fantasy and science fiction genres to make sense of a chaotic yet interesting world. So welcome, Natasha.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So I noticed you've written quite a number of Pariah Child series books and published them, and now you're on a new one. So can you tell us a little bit about how you got started, like why you decided to start writing all this?
Yeah, so funny enough, I actually was traditionally published in the beginning. And the way I became, the way that I would eventually become self-published is by kind of going through several experiences with my traditional publisher. So I had, as my biography said, I had dug up an old manuscript from my childhood. And I decided, you know what, I remember writing this as a kid and I kept working on it as a kid. I would really like to see if it could be something. So after several rounds of edits and, trying to get beta readers and all that sort of stuff, I submitted it to several publishing houses and I got rejected. And I submitted it to more publishing houses and I got rejected. So, the usual experience of just like you're waiting on pins and needles, but all I was getting was rejection emails. So what I decided to do after that was submit to one more publishing house, and they eventually got back to me and they told me that, hey, they basically said like, hey, we can tell you can write, but we're really not interested in fantasy, right? My book was a fantasy novel. And we would love it if you could write romance for us. Do you have any interest in that? And so at the time I had the mindset of, well, it's better to have your foot in the door, like to be in the publishing industry, right? Than to be outside the door, like looking in the window, watching everyone else. so I decided, you know what? Yeah, I'll write romance. And so I did that for, I think, maybe only like 2 years, but I wasn't really happy doing that for several reasons. And I decided that, you know what, I've heard about this self-publishing thing, I've seen people like talk about it a little bit, and I decided that I was going to try to do it. So I got into full like research mode, and that would eventually lead to the first book in my Pariah Child series, which is the Pariah Child, which is the Pariah Child and the Ever Giving Stone, and then that would lead to the other 3 books in the series. So yeah, that's how I got into self-publishing.
Are you still writing romance?
Not at the moment. I've considered going back into romance, particularly because it's very interesting going from like college to now being almost 30. It's like, your views and thoughts about romance kind of change. So now I have actually thought to myself, like, I might want to get back into writing romance, but nothing is decided yet. So we'll see what happens.
Well, what do you think is the biggest difference in your experience between having a traditional publisher versus self-publishing?
Well, there are several different experiences. I think I'd have to start with the fact that when you are self-published, you make all the decisions. I mean, you can find online writing communities, and some people are lucky enough to have mentors. I within the last like year and a half, I actually was given a mentor through a writing organization. But for the most part, even if you have someone to seek advice from, the final decision is yours. And so I've said this before when it comes to self-publishing, but you're basically like the CFO, right? So Chief Financial Officer, you're the CEO, the COO, you're like the executive of all the departments when it comes to self-publishing, because you have to make all the final decisions. So when I was working on my first book, it was my job to find cover artists and to, whittle down my list of cover artists and to ask them for samples, and then to go through their samples and then to talk about pricing. And and all of that stuff, and to schedule meetings with them, and to do all this research. I didn't have anyone else to do that for me. When it came to formatting my book, I had to find someone through another author I knew who knew an author who then recommended this person to me, to teach me how to format books and everything. So, you have to make all those decisions. You definitely should have a budget and have very specific line items in your budget, because if you're not careful, and everyone's in a different financial situation, but if you're not careful, you can end up spending a lot of money on a book that you may not necessarily have.
And for traditional, like everything is paid
Oh.
for by the publisher.
Sorry, it's been so long since I've been traditionally published. So like my mind went, yes, when I was traditionally published, everything was paid for by the publisher. So they asked for my feedback and thoughts and opinions on like the cover design, and of course they would have someone edit my book, and so I could talk with my editor. But they primarily made all the final decisions. A few decisions that I wasn't necessarily happy with. And I think a lot of authors, I used to be like this too. I thought that if I'm traditionally published, then they're going to handle the marketing for me and the promotion of my book, and I'll primarily just be able to like focus on writing and like bringing these characters in my worlds to life and all that sort of stuff. But that's not really what happened. I think it's very poetic in a way for us writers. We just imagine ourselves like sitting alone in a very decorated office and like writing whimsical things or whatever comes to mind, right? But that's just not how it works. One of the pieces of advice that I got from my publisher when I was traditionally published, in terms of marketing, it was just like, we'll just create a Facebook page. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. So that's what I did. I created a Facebook page, and I tried to get a lot of followers to the Facebook page by sharing it with like friends and family. Because at this time, Facebook was still like a very happening, a very happening social media platform. I'm not even on Facebook anymore. I not to get onto my favorite social media platform, but Facebook is like my least favorite social media platform. But because my publisher told me that, hey, you need to have a Facebook page in order to market your books, I said, okay, sure, why not? We didn't discuss like which demographic I was aiming for, who was my audience. Were they even on Facebook pages? Were they even on Facebook? Did they prefer Facebook pages over Facebook groups? We didn't have any of that discussion. It was just like, create a Facebook page and that's how you market. And so I did. And while my Facebook page now is kind of like coming back a little bit, in the past, it was very dead, to be quite honest. And it didn't really do much for me in terms of like my marketing and promotion, I feel. And in hindsight, I understand why my publisher told me that, like suggested that I create a Facebook page, because at the time, that's what a lot of people were doing. And also Facebook has an older audience. And some of the writers who were with my publisher were older than me. And so it made sense for them to be on Facebook and to be creating like, content and building audience through Facebook. But for me and what I was trying to write, it actually, in hindsight, I'm like, I don't think that actually made sense. And it also was not the best piece of advice. Creating a Facebook page is not the answer to all your marketing and promotional needs. So I think I answered your question in a very long-winded way.
That's okay. So like, what kind of marketing things are you doing for yourself now? Like now that you're self-publishing, right?
Yeah. So this is all going to look together, I promise. So I am a member of SFWA, which is Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America. And I've been a member now for like about 2 years, so like still new compared to some people who have been there for like decades. But SFWA does have a mentorship program. And so I decided to sign up for said program, and I found a mentor who has given me some really great advice. And it's kind of been, since completing the mentorship and having her advice and everything, it's kind of been like for me, I feel like a shift in my career, because I feel like I had all this knowledge that I kind of learned through like stumbling and falling and making mistakes. And also like trying to do a lot of research online, like trying to speak to older authors who knew a bit more than me. But after going through the mentorship program with her, it felt like all of that knowledge I had in my brain was kind of organized and made more sense. And so one thing that my mentor told me that was like very interesting, but you made it was very interesting. And when she told it to me, I was kind of like, really, that's it? But I asked her like, well, what's the best type of marketing, you know? And she was like, writing another book. She's like, writing another book is like the best type of marketing you can do. And I was so confused by that because I was like, well, no, because, you know, if you release one book and no one's reading it, you know, it's going to be harder for you to release a second book because you're not going to have money built on the first book. And she explained, and now I can understand what she was saying. People like series, right? Series sell more than standalones. This is just how it is. Because people like being pulled into the world and they really fall in love with characters and they become very deeply invested with the characters. So series sell more than books. And so if you're going to write a series with the way the publishing world is now, where readers are ravenous, particularly in certain genres, readers are like just, they go through books like it's nothing. You need to be able to keep up with that. And so the idea isn't so much like, I'm going to publish this one book, I'm going to get like all eyes on this book and everyone's going to buy it. And that's going to be how I make my career, right? The idea is more of like a slow, more like a gradual buildup, I think is a good way to describe it. So you publish one book, you get some eyes on it, right? And then you go ahead and publish the next book as soon as you can, so that anyone who saw your first book, well, then they can immediately go on to, not immediately, but as soon as possible, right? Go on to the next book. And then that's how you slowly start building up your readership. I'm giving a very like summarized version of all of it and everything, but that's one really good piece of advice she gave me. I would also say that obviously using book promotion platforms has been very helpful. Trying to build up your newsletter has been very helpful. And also the best way to build your newsletter is also by writing another book and making sure that it is, and like by making sure that you mention in your back matter that you have a newsletter and hyperlink to your newsletter in your ebook version. Okay, I'm rambling, I could go on, but yeah, I think that answered the question.
So how long does it take you to write a book? Like I noticed you have a couple of them for your Pariah Child series. So you wrote your first one, and then how long does it take for you to write a book and then release, etc.?
Yeah, so so one thing that also came out of like my mentorship was like, okay, you need to release books more often, because I was at that, when I first published the first book in the Pariah Child series, it was like 2018. And I don't think I published the next book until like probably late 2019. I don't have the dates in front of me, so I probably will have to go back and check. But I was pretty much releasing a book every like 7 months to once a year. So sometimes it would be like one book a year. If I did well, I would get like two books a year. And I think for a lot of authors, and this is what I'll say, for traditionally published authors, I think this may be normal, right? It may to release one or two books a year may be really good. But with me being indie published, what I realized is that 1 to 2 books a year is not how you're going to snag a reader, really, because they read the book, and then if there's nothing else following after that, they go ahead and find another series to read, and then they kind of forget about you, basically, because there are a lot of authors out there. There are a lot of stories that are being told out there, and if you can't capture someone's like interest and attention, you know, it can kind of just say like, okay, well, let me go do something else. It's the same reason. I can't remember the term now, but there's a specific term for it, but I'll just say it's the same reason that binging on Netflix is so popular, which is that, you know, Netflix can release a new show, and if it's like 8 episodes, well, if I watch episode 1 and I like episode 1, why would I not go ahead and watch episode 2 if it's immediately available, right? Now, of course, sometimes Netflix does things where like they might, if it's like an 8-episode show, they might release 4 episodes. And so I'll binge the first 4, but by the time I get through the 4th episode, I'm like hooked, and I can't wait until like a month or 3 months from now until they release the next 4. Do you know what I mean? So it's all about hooking the reader and trying to like keep their interest and attention, if that makes sense.
No, that makes total sense. Like, yeah, when you're binging something, you want the next one, and things are moving so fast now. It's not like people are looking forward to the next year when your next book is coming out and you're gonna have a massive campaign.
Yeah.
Like things are just different now. And yeah, and with self-publishing especially, it depends. It seems like, yeah, a lot of the people that do series, they have a lot, and some of them actually prefer to be indie published because they can keep most of the money instead of
That too.
giving it to the publisher, right? So it depends on the person writing, I think. I was having an argument with someone. I was like, some of these guys write a book a month. I'm like, are they any good? And then someone's like, well, it depends on your brain. Because some people are really good at compressed work and others will take like 10 years. So, you know,
Yeah.
everyone's different.
Yeah, and there are also different types of readers too. The way I like to describe it is like some writers write for the explosions and like some readers read for the explosions, meaning that some readers they don't care about this character development. they don't care about, you know, going through the character's backstory and connecting it to their current trauma, and they don't care about all that sort of stuff. They don't care about your prose and what type of vocabulary you're using. They want the drama, they want the arguments, they want her to be in the bar like slapping him in the face, like, you know, they want that sort of stuff. They want the hot kiss, the hot first kiss or whatever, right? That's the sort of stuff they want, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are like writers and readers who, to me, like they write for the explosions, the big dramatic scenes and events, and just to get to the good stuff and everything. And I think we can all be honest and say that we've all read books like that, sometimes just to clear our heads of the heavier things that we may be reading, right? Just pick up something very short that is not going to make you like overthink too much, and just kind of like clears you up for your next like heavy read. So yeah.
Yeah, like you say, like there's all sorts of books for a different type of people. But I have to admit, sometimes I think, especially because I've been submitting a lot of short stories lately, that I find that, yeah, the ones that pay well are, you know, the certain lit magazines, right? It seems like that's still the quote unquote, you know, respectable thing, where genre fiction, I think over time, maybe, but to each their own, right? It's like classical music versus pop kind of thing.
that is a good, very, very true. Yes, I agree.
So do you have any advice for people that want to start writing? Like, and obviously, you know, everyone's busy, or say they're busy, and you know, they have jobs, etc.
Yeah. So the best advice to start writing is just to do it. I wish it was more complicated than that, but that's that really is the best advice. Just sit down and start writing. And you know, I would say that I'm in a situation where I have more free time than other people, not only because I work from home, but I don't have kids or a husband or like pets
No
or anything
kids
like
is
that.
a big one.
Yeah, like I have writer friends who have kids, and you know, them writing is very different than me writing, because I can just sit here and write, and they have to like, they're writing and then like their kids will come over and they're like, Mom, and you know, that sort of thing, which is great, but it's just, you have to consider your own individual situation as well. So for me, when I'm actively writing a novel, I aim to write 2,000 words a day, not including the weekends, like the work day. Now, do I always meet that 2,000 word goal? No, I do not. I wish I could say I had a 100% on my track record there, but I don't always meet that goal. But it gives me something to aim to, it gives me something just to work towards. And I have noticed that since I started putting a goal on myself of like, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're going to get up early and write 2,000 words before the workday starts, I have noticed that my writing has gotten faster, because it's like, I know I have to meet this goal, or at least I'm trying to meet this goal. And so instead of me, in the past, what I would do, instead of me doing the like, well, I'll write 500 words and all right, well, done for the day. I could probably write more, but that's enough. And I would go off and do something else, or I might come in and write 200 words and then leave and come back out. I don't really do that anymore. Instead, I would just get up, sit down. Okay, our goal is 2,000 words. Let's see if we can get 2,000 words in. And then once I get 2,000 words in, okay, I'm done with writing stuff for the day. And I have to focus on like the regular 9 to 5. So I think the best way to get started in writing is just to do it and set a realistic goal for yourself. And yeah, I think that's a good way to get started.
Do you plot at all? I think over time, sometimes I plot and then sometimes I write, but also I'm not afraid to throw out stuff. You know what I mean? Like there are a lot of writers that write and they're afraid to toss things, but after a while I'm like, this isn't working, but I will take bits and pieces. You know what I mean? Nothing is wasted, but it's just sometimes you're like, this isn't working, right? So it's going to go, the scene, and will just take, you know, a couple sentences or whatever.
Yeah, so I was once, I'm a former prancer. I was very like, whenever the mood strikes me, I'm gonna write. And like until I'm inspired, because I'm a sensitive writer, you know, that's literally how I used to do it. Like until I'm inspired, I can't work on my craft. But I am no longer like that. I'm definitely a plotter now. But like you said, just because I plot out my story, I've never plotted out an entire series, but I plot out my individual books now. However, that being said, if I'm writing and something starts to like not feel right, I will just go ahead and toss some stuff out and go a different direction, and then just update the outline whenever I'm done writing that day. And with I have a standalone novel, which people keep telling me it should be a series, but I'm like, no, this is just a standalone novel. It's The Woman in the Tree, which is a like feminist retelling of the King Arthur legends. And I had an entire outline for that story. And I was just like going along the outline. It was like, oh, this is going swimmingly. This is perfect, you know? And then it got near the end of it. And I was like, oh, this isn't feeling right anymore. Something's off, something's wrong. And so, I went back to my outline and I was like, I think I want to do something different. And I decided to just go in a totally different direction for how the story ended. And it felt that the Woman in the Tree was the first, I believe, yeah, it was. Okay. It was the first novel that I had outlined. Until then, was it? I think it was. maybe I'm lying to myself. I'm pretty sure The Woman in the Tree was the first novel I had outlined. But prior to that, like I said, I would just write whenever the mood struck me. But because it was the first novel I had outlined, I thought I had to like stick to the outline, and I kept trying to force the novel to fit into one, you know, pass, and it just wasn't working. And so I eventually was like, okay, this isn't working. I finished the novel. I went a totally different direction for the ending, and I just updated the outline, and I was like, oh, nothing happened. The world did not end. This is fine. And so, yeah, I also think that a lot of authors, not every author, but a lot of authors, as they grow in their writing career, I think more and more more authors become plotters, or they become plotter adjacent, I'll say.
Yeah, it just sort of helps you write a little bit faster,
Yeah.
if you have an idea of where you're going. Okay, so last question is, where can we find your books and you?
Yeah, so you can find me at natashadlanewrites.com. That has all of the information about me, some fun facts about me, and also more information about my books. You can also find me on Instagram at Natasha D Lane Writes, and on Twitter at, let me see if I can remember my Twitter handle. It's Natasha_Lane1, I believe. So
Yes.
those are pretty much all the places you can find me. Also, with my recent release, Involuntary Time Traveler, which is a science fiction novel, if you subscribe to my newsletter, I actually have a gumbo recipe that you can download. But if you read the book, the gumbo recipe is mentioned in the book, and so it's like really important to the main character for a reason, for a very funny reason. But yeah, so you subscribe to my newsletter, you also get a free gumbo recipe.
Oh, there we go. All right, so you're going to read from your newest book, right?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit before you start reading.
Yeah, of course. So my latest release came out September 23rd. As I said, it's called Involuntary Time Traveler. It's the first book in my Kiana Morgan series. And the book centers around the main, as you can probably guess, the main character, Kiana Morgan. She's a graduate student at HTU, which is Harriet Tubman University, and the entire series is going to take place in a magical world where magic is the norm. It's modern times, but pretty much everyone's a witch. Like magic is just something normal and a part of everyday life. And so one day, Kiana is helping her younger sister, Tia, practice a few teleportation spells. And by helping her younger sister, Tia actually ends up sending Kiana back in time accidentally to the French Revolution. And so Kiana then has to figure out how to survive through the French Revolution and also how to get back to her time. So that's what Involuntary Time Traveler is about. I'm expecting for the series to be maybe like 4 books long at this point. But yeah, that's what the book is about. And the scene that I am about to read to you is actually Kiana going out with one of her good friends to a magical bar, and about their experience there. So that's the scene. So Gilly and Kiana are outside of the club, and they have just gotten the approval to go into the club, and so this is what happens that night. Gilly smirked at the bouncer. Have a nice night, man. A couple stumbled out of the club, smelling like alcohol and sweat. They cut right between us, so I used the opportunity and slid inside. Gilly followed behind me, but I was watching the bouncer in case he tried anything. He hadn't been so nice to Gilly after all. The bouncer met my stare with a laugh. The door closed too quickly for him to see me flipping him off. The club had 2 floors. The bottom and more spacious area had a sign in front of it that read "Closed." Gilly stepped past me and began moving up the stairs. I placed a hand on his forearm and pulled him to the side as the group made their way toward the exit. I gazed up at him. Are you okay? That guy was being an asshole. I'm definitely going to report him. I'll blast his name all over Juan Pod. Gilly shrugged, staring anywhere except at me. It's whatever, he said. It's not whatever. If you prefer we go to a different place or somewhere else, we can totally do that. Nope. We're staying here, drinking and dancing. Forget that guy, Gilly responded. Are you sure? I asked him. He said, grabbing my shoulders. I'm fine. I'm not going to think about that guy. We're going to have fun, all right? Guys like him, they're just whatever. They had their little thing and now they're just grumpy about it. The biggest middle finger to people like him is to do what we want. So let's do what we want. And what do you want to do? He tightened his hold on my shoulders and I looked up at him. He said, what do you want to do? I want to dance. I'm sorry, what was that? You want to what? I want to dance, I yelled at him. And I want to drink, I screamed. We both started laughing. Gilly headed up the stairs, grabbing my arm and dragging me along with him. There was a single landing between the first and second floor. Also, a crap ton of walls padded with black painted bubble wrap and stair railings coated in purple fur. Pursuit was an odd place, but it was just how I liked it. Together, Gilly and I pushed the second floor door open and stumbled into an epic scene. They had completely changed the decor and setup. The dance floor had been expanded and huge strobe lights were flashing. Industrial railings hung above us, packed with people dancing, while the railings circulated around the room. On the outskirts of the space, a few people stood around thin neck tables. Others lounged on the few couches that were available. Enchanted bubbles floated through the air, changing colors, shrinking and expanding. That was when I noticed a group of people grabbing the bubbles, then popping them in front of their mouths. If my theory is correct, I grabbed 2 bubbles and handed one to Gilly. He shook his head and mouthed the word, why? I pointed to the bubbles, then my mouth. After bringing it to my lips, I gave the bubble a little squeeze. It popped easily and the sweet taste of whiskey coated my tongue. I leaned over to Gilly and cupped my hand by his ear. It's alcohol. Stepping back, I saw the surprised look on his face. He repeated the process with his own bubble, and by the end, he was licking his lips. I laughed. He was such a dork. I'm buying drinks, I shouted, pointing to the bar across the dance floor. He nodded and then pointed to an empty table in the corner. I went left and he went right. As expected, the bar was packed, but I managed to get the bartender's attention for about 2 minutes. That was enough time to order 6 shots of dragon's breath and 2 goblin tails, which were poured into swirling green glasses. Gilly slapped the table and burst out laughing when I arrived at the drinks. I shrugged. We both certainly deserved them. As always, we split everything 50-50. 3 shots for him, 3 shots for me. On the last shot of dragon's breath, we inhaled, then blew out a smoky breath that twirled in the air. It never got old. Gilly leaned across the table. Race you. Before I had even registered what he meant, Gilly had grabbed the goblin's tail and started downing it. I rushed to keep up with him. Sadly, or perhaps not so sadly, the shots were already taking effect. When I finished the last drink, I tossed my head back, grinning up at the ceiling. Everything felt loose, and a sweet taste lingered on my tongue. Thrusting my arms up and spinning, I made my way to the dance floor. Some song was playing. I had no clue what, but it felt good running through me. The beat felt good. The sound felt good to my ears too, so I moved. Gilly was in front of me doing his own dance. People stepped, shook, and spun around us. Then Gilly was close, really close. I giggled, looking up at him. What was he doing? He's such a goober. For a moment, everything stopped, and I knew the goblin's tail was hitting me. I sunk into it. The liquor had the room spinning while I stood perfectly still. It was spinning so fast. Someone grabbed my hips. Gilly? He was dancing with me. That was fine. We had done that before. I leaned into him and grabbed his shoulders. Everything around me was a twirling blur except Gilly. He was standing still, right there with me. And then his hands were on my thighs, soft and warm. I felt a heat spread up. Spread up from where he held me directly to my core. Something heavy and welcoming started in my chest. My breaths were coming out faster than before. He pressed his lips against mine. They were soft. His tongue glided along my bottom lip as he pulled me close. I could feel it all happening, but it took me a minute to realize exactly what was happening. Gilly was kissing me. Gilly was kissing me. Holy fuck, Gilly was kissing me. And it felt good, more than good. His magic surrounded me, solid and light, pressing against me and touching my own energy. My breath caught in my throat. I broke away from him and just stared. Fuck. Gilly pulled my lips to his again as his magic surrounded mine, then pressed down on it. The sphere of energy around us was buzzing with friction. His magic moved rapidly around mine while he moved his thumb along my throat. With the alcohol, the kissing, the music, and the magic, it was hard to focus. Gilly's energy was wrapping around mine a little too tightly. Instead of embracing my magic, this wasn't right. I gasped and stumbled away from him. His hands grasped my left wrist. We looked into each other's eyes. He was trying to blend his magic with my own. It wasn't working though. Instead, it felt like he was trying to shrink me. I didn't want our magic to blend. Pushing away from him, my magic shot outward, sending a few people stumbling back. I struggled to catch my breath. Security was rushing toward me, but I had already turned to leave. I pushed the door open and ran out the front before making a hard right. Home was the only place I wanted to be, away from he. Wrapping my arms around myself, I walked faster. A few people stared. I mentally flipped them off. Gilly kept yelling behind me. Just walk, I told myself. Keep walking. Figure out what the fuck happened later. I heard Gilly before I saw him. He ran in front of me, then moved to the left as I tried to move around him. Gritting my teeth, I bit back a curse. Move, I whispered. I'm sorry. Look, that's not how I wanted it to happen. Wanted what to happen? Gilly took a deep breath, then tried to stand straight. He was as drunk as I was, so we were both having trouble. A sudden burst of magic had shocked my system, but eventually the liquor would settle over me again. There was no way either one of us was ready for the conversation that was about to ensue. He moved toward me. I stepped away. I'm really sorry. You had felt my magic before. I didn't think you'd mind blending with me. Really? You really didn't think I'd have an issue with that? I closed my eyes and breathed sharply through my nose. When I exhaled, it didn't make me feel much calmer. Sharing magic, I said, eyeing him, is not the same as blending. That shit's deep. It's intimate. I wrapped my arms around myself again. He had felt a part of me without my permission. Yeah, sure. On the opposite end of the blend was Gilly, but it still wasn't okay. He wiped his face, bending down for a moment before shooting back up. I'm going to say it. Say what? I like you, Kiana, and not as friends. Staring at him, I let the shit he had said to me set in. Once it had, I walked past him, mumbling "fuck" to myself on repeat. And of course, he followed. The only time I didn't want him, my best friend, around. You're right, though. The blending was too soon. Way too soon, he said, walking beside me. We can take it slow, okay? I'm sorry if I crossed the line. If I nearly screamed at him, still sprint walking away from him in the club. I'm sorry, not an if, he replied. The words were like bad jello shots from his mouth, jiggling and sloshing around. How long, I asked. How long what? I stopped walking and turned to face him. A few tears rolled down my cheeks while my lips trembled. How long have you liked me? I hated that I sounded like a middle schooler. Oh, I guess the last 6 months. He kicked at the ground. Honestly, it's crossed my mind before. Fuck, Gilly took a deep breath. Recently I realized I can't be friends with you, not just friends. I wanted to puke. Instead, I decided on some shuddering inhales, even though I felt like I wasn't getting any air. Kneeling down, I pressed my hands into my temples and tried to focus on breathing. His hands were on my shoulders immediately. I want to push his touch away while simultaneously welcoming it. When I felt slightly less like my heart was being ripped out, I spoke. So it's either I date you or I lose our friendship? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? I shouted. What are you saying after trying to force a blend on me, huh? I already apologized, Key. That doesn't make it go away, Gil, I snapped. I can't believe you think otherwise. We both got to our feet and stood apart from one another. The wind wasn't blowing. I still tightened the hold I had on myself. We were quiet for a moment. You're telling me you've never thought about it. It was his turn to cross his arms. I looked away, anywhere except at him. Key, stop, Gil. I want to know. It's too much, all right? We're both too drunk, and I'm not answering that question. It's not important, he scoffed. Really? So my feelings aren't important? I rolled my eyes at him. You know that's not what I meant. It feels like it. Well, I guess we have nothing else to talk about then, huh? Guess not. Neither of us moved. A group of people walked between us, glancing around awkwardly. When they were gone, we were still having a staring contest. I finally turned away from him and headed toward my car. Behind me, I heard him sighing, then his shoes pounding against the sidewalk as he turned his back on me. And that is the scene I'm reading for you all.
Well, thank you very much. So this book was just released and it's available, and I guess online and everywhere.
Yeah, it's on Amazon, Kobo, Barnes & Nobles, and Apple Books.
Okay, awesome. So have a good day, and we will talk more later.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me.
For more upcoming episodes of the Artsy Raven about writing and publishing, visit us at jfgarrard.com/arpodcast. A reminder to Patreon subscribers that there is bonus content available for every episode on the Patreon website. If you enjoyed the show, you can show your appreciation by buying us some digital coffee. The Artsy Raven is produced by J.F. Garrard. The voice in the show's introduction is Chris Gorman, and music is by Tim Moore. Thank you for tuning in. Until next time, stay safe.